What's up, guys? Welcome to the video. My channel name is College Football Frenzy, and today I'm gonna be breaking down the top 5 most disappointing teams in the 2019 college football season. Obviously, every year you have programs that disappoint, and then you have programs that go beyond expectations. This past season, there were a lot of big programs that people had high expectations for. A lot of these programs had won national championships in the past and had been relevant in previous years before, and people were expecting some of these programs to have a pretty good season overall, possibly be a playoff contender or at least a ranked team. Now, that wasn't the case for a few of these programs, and I'm obviously going to be breaking each one of them down. Just a lot of programs, I feel like last year, especially a lot of the big name ones, definitely disappointed. And I think it had to do with a lot of different factors, but there were just a lot of surprising disappointments last year. It looked like teams had all the pieces they needed to, and some teams just couldn't get it done. So today I'm going to be breaking down those 5 most disappointing teams. I'm also going to do some honorable mentions toward the end of the video, but without further ado, let's get into it right away. Number 5 are the Miami Hurricanes. So as you can see, they went 6-7 overall. Now, looking at the schedule, I feel like they especially did pretty poorly towards the end of the season, but just overall, it wasn't a great season for them. A lot of disappointments. The wins, a lot of them were close. They just really had a tough season overall. I just really don't know what happened to them. It was just a really tough season. I was expecting a lot from the Hurricanes, to be honest. I understand they had a new head coach in May Diaz, but people were expecting this football program to possibly be a contender, to be in the top 25, maybe a New Year's Six Bowl contender. A lot of people had them in the ACC championship game, but that was not the case whatsoever with this program. And I think it had to do with the inexperience on certain positions on the offense, but just a ton of mistakes were made. Their offense, as you can see, a lot of games was absolutely non-existent. And really, their defense carried them throughout the season. I understand Miami's been known to usually have a better defense than the offense, but still, it was just a terrible season for them overall. Very disappointing. 6-7, that's not going to cut it for Hurricanes fans. And, just the offense just totally disappointed. And really, the last straw came in their bowl game against Louisiana Tech in the Walk-Ons Independence Bowl. Louisiana Tech's a Conference USA team. I think Miami fans were obviously expecting a win, and they got shut out 14-0. That was crazy. I had big concerns as early as North Carolina and Virginia Tech. Now, those two teams ended up actually being decent, but just a lot of terrible losses, like FIU. You can't lose to FIU on the road. So they had a lot of trouble. I think it was because of inexperience on the offense, but never fear if you're a Hurricanes fan, because the defense should still be good. Ed Reed's coming in at chief of staff, and also the offense should be better because they're getting Derek King through the transfer portal. So that's definitely going to help. I think they're going to be a better football team next year, but man, it was a disappointing season. People had high expectations for them, and they did not even come close to meeting them. Their final FBI rank was 45. The ESPN FBI sometimes isn't the most reliable source, but for this, I just went by the FBI because it ranks all the teams in college football. But yeah, just disappointing season for them. Syracuse Orange at number 4. So this is probably a team that most people don't have on their list. I think a lot of people probably would forget this team. Now, I do like Syracuse a little bit. I will admit I probably had a little bit too high expectations for Syracuse coming into the season. I thought they were going to be a 2 or 3 loss team, but to be fair, most people expected them to be that because last season they were a pretty good football team, at least in 2018. In 2019, they just completely disappointed. I had big questions after they lost to Maryland. Now, people thought at first maybe Maryland's just a good football team, but 63-20, that's absolutely inexcusable. And Maryland ended up being a 3-win team, I think. They were terrible. And then after that, the season completely derailed. They won their last game against Wake Forest in overtime. I guess that was a decent win. But just especially towards the end of the season, look at that stretch from NC State to Louisville. That's tough. They had a really tough season. 5-7 overall, did not make a bowl game. In my opinion, they were one of the worst teams in all of the ACC. The final FBI rank for them was 71. I was just shocked. I really thought they were going to be a pretty good football team. for this past season. I really did. And their schedule was pretty manageable. It really was. Looking at it, all those games, they're manageable games aside from Clemson. They really could have won all of them, but they just completely disappointed. Big shocker for them. Like losing to rival Boston College by 20 plus or 30 plus, actually. I mean, that was a shocker. There were just so many games where they disappointed. So overall, I have them at 4 right now. I don't really see them improving too much, maybe by a game or two, but I don't think they'll improve to a point where they're a ranked team again. I think Miami, which I just did, has more potential to improve than a team like Syracuse does, just because Syracuse doesn't really get good talent. But man, they were disappointing last year. 5-7, that's crazy. Some people had them in the bottom 25 overall in college football, and they started in the top 25. So a complete turnaround, and not in a good way. 3, the Michigan Wolverines. Listen, I put them at 3. I could have put them higher. They have a lot of talent. They were very talented this past season. Shea Patterson had a great season, in my opinion, in 2018. The defense for Michigan was absolutely great in 2018. I think people had high expectations for this team, especially because Ohio State had a new coach. Ryan Day ended up being a pretty good coach in his first year, but still, people didn't know that at the time. And people are expecting Michigan to make the playoff, at least make the Big Ten championship game, to end the streak against Ohio State. Overall, they had high expectations for the Wolverines. And to be honest, I did too. I'm an Ohio State fan, but I expected them to be a very good football team this past season. Now, it's not a shocker that Harbaugh disappointed because he does it. He's done it a lot. You have to agree with that, whether you're a Michigan fan or not. He has disappointed quite many times, but I really wasn't expecting a 3-loss season for Michigan. I mean, the first big surprise came against Middle Tennessee. Only winning by 19 at home. Middle Tennessee's a very average Conference USA team. So that was the first question mark, but maybe I thought it was just a fluke. Then the next week, Army took them to double overtime, and really, Army actually had a chance to win that game on a game-winning field goal. They missed it. They probably should have won that game, and that's when people are thinking, oh man, this season's going to go downhill quickly. And Wisconsin at that time was doing very well, so people had bad feelings about that game, and sure enough, Wisconsin absolutely manhandled Michigan, absolutely manhandled them. I mean, the score doesn't really show it. I think Wisconsin was up by more. Michigan made put a little bit more points up on the board late in the game, but man, Wisconsin just absolutely embarrassed them at home. And after that, people thought their playoff chances were already ruined. After the Penn State game, which they lost, people started to, get their feelings a little bit higher about Michigan because they played decent in that game, and they actually went on a decent stretch, like a 4-game stretch. And then people started thinking, all right, maybe they have a chance against Ohio State. But of course, Ohio State brought them to reality again, destroying Michigan by quite a lot. I didn't think Ohio State would win by that much. But overall, just a really disappointing season. They started out pretty slow. They had some decent wins. I mean, Iowa was a top 15 team, and you look at Notre Dame, that's a pretty good win. Notre Dame had only 2 losses last year, so they had a couple good wins, and they had a stint where it looked like they might be turning things around, but just overall, it was a tough season. And in their bowl game against Alabama, they were winning at half, but after halftime, things, just like the season, things completely turned around, and wasn't good in their bowl game. They just got embarrassed in the second half of the Citrus Bowl. So overall, it was a pretty disappointing season for them. I just feel like compared to other teams on this list, especially with the talent Michigan had, they should have been at least a 10-2 team in my opinion. I understand all 3 of their losses, or all 4 of their losses, were to respectable teams. But really, the talent they had a great wide receiver core. They had a great running back core. They had a pretty good quarterback, and the defense in 2018 was great, and they had a pretty good recruiting class. So people are expecting very big things, and they could not deliver whatsoever. So yeah, definitely a disappointing team. Number 2, Texas. So obviously, you probably expected this one to be on here. Yes, Texas was not back last year. Whether they'll be back this upcoming season, I don't know yet. Their schedule's favorable, so they should do a little bit better. But man, what a surprising season for Texas. Now, like Miami, I feel like Texas does have a big excuse. They do have a big excuse. They were hit by the injury bug pretty hard. I have to say that they had a lot of injuries. They got banged up in the LSU game and the Oklahoma State game. Now, to be honest, after the LSU game, I actually thought Texas was a pretty good team and not overhyped. I mean, losing to LSU by 7, who ended up being the national champion, I didn't think that was that bad of a loss. So I thought maybe Texas is actually a decent football team. And then they played Oklahoma pretty well and lost by 7 at neutral site. So I thought, okay, maybe they're decent. Then the next week, things started to turn around. Obviously, it was the Kansas game where I was like, whoa, what is happening? 50-48 against Kansas. I mean, what the heck? That was such a disappointing game, and after that, you kind of knew Texas looked like it was falling off, and sure enough, they did. They lost to TCU the next week, cut it close with Kansas State, lost 2 straight against Iowa State and Baylor. You know, they finished the season well, beating rival Texas Tech, and they destroyed Utah, who was a ranked team, in the Alamo Bowl, so I guess it was a decent ending. Overall, they finished 8-5, but man, they just had that stretch in the middle of the season where they completely disappointed. And I do think it was because of injuries, but also they had a lot of other talent they could have gone to. I think Sam Ehlinger definitely disappointed. The offense just overall didn't play up to expectations. They definitely had a lot of firepower, and it didn't convert on the field. I don't know if that's just bad chemistry, but it didn't seem to convert on the field. But overall, I think it was a pretty disappointing season for Texas. They still finished in the top 25 in the AP poll somehow, and their FBI rank was still 20, so I guess they were still a ranked team. But still, 8-5 was not what people were expecting. They were expecting a possible playoff contender, maybe a team that ended up going to the national championship. Alright, so honorable mentions, I have Northwestern, Army, Washington. There are many other schools I could have added on here, but these were the 3 schools that I felt like definitely were the biggest disappointments outside of my top 5. Of course, there's many programs that disappoint, but these 3 I definitely felt like could have done a lot better. Obviously, Northwestern in 2018 made the Big Ten championship game. They were a 3-win team in 2019. What happened there? That was a complete disappointment. I was shocked. I mean, the way they played was absolutely terrible. Army, unlike their counterpart, Navy, did great last season. They impressed a lot of people. They went beyond expectations. Army, on the other hand, went below expectations. And after the Michigan game, people thought, hey, maybe this is a decent football program. I mean, they only lost to Michigan by 3 and probably should have won that game. And it was in the Big House. So people thought, all right, Army's a decent program, but the rest of the season they were pretty bad. They finally lost to Navy. They had a streak going against Navy before this past season. It was just overall a disappointing season for Army. No bowl game for them. And Washington. I really don't know what happened to Washington. Washington last year won the Pac-12. They made the Rose Bowl. What happened there? They were barely bowl eligible this past season, and many people had them inside their top 15 and as a possible repeat for the Pac-12 champion this past season, but it was none of that. I mean, they had a great quarterback too, Jacob Eason from Georgia, but he didn't play very well, and I don't know what happened with Washington. They just lost many close games, and overall it was a pretty disappointing season. They did not finish in the rankings. They ended up winning their bowl game against Boise State. That was the highlight of the season. But overall, just a completely disappointing season for Washington. Definitely not the way Chris Peterson wanted to go out with this program, I imagine. But hey, at least they won their bowl game. But still, definitely disappointing. They were supposed to be a ranked team and a contender to win the Pac-12 championship. Nebraska's number 1. This was an obvious one. Nebraska's clearly the most disappointing team, in my opinion, of 2019. For those viewers my age, they probably don't understand how much success Nebraska's had, but obviously a lot of the older viewers do. Nebraska had a ton of success in the 90s especially. They had so many dominant teams. They had success in the 70s. They're known to have some of the best football teams in all of college football history. I probably would say the 95 Huskers were the best team in all of college football history. Their fans constantly sell out their stadium. Memorial Stadium is one of the toughest places to play at. It's sold out no matter what. They could be playing Portland State University, and it would be sold out. So Nebraska, of course, is going to have big expectations. They really are kind of, in my opinion, a blue blood of college football. That's how I see them as. And really, they had a very disappointing season last year. I just couldn't believe it. The first big issue was losing to Colorado, obviously. I mean, that was a bad loss. The Huskers were supposed to be a top 25 team. They're much more talented, big expectations, a great head coach, and losing to Colorado, a team that's usually the worst team in the Pac-12, that's unacceptable. Then they won. Then they won the next two games. Obviously, Illinois was a bit close. That was another concern. And going into that Ohio State game, to be honest, as an Ohio State fan, I did think it would be close. I thought it would be close. Many people were picking Nebraska to win. I mean, think about it. It's a Big Ten West opponent on the road. Ohio State in the past few years before 2019 did not have much success on the road against Big Ten opponents. Cough, cough, Iowa and Purdue. So I was a little bit nervous as an Ohio State fan going into this game. I don't know what happened in Nebraska. They just completely disappointed. Ohio State just outplayed them in every single category. So that was a complete disappointment. Then you had Northwestern. That was a little bit close. I mean, Northwestern, obviously, the start of the season, people had them as being a decent football team. Obviously, we know they were a very bad football team last year. So looking back on it, that was a bad win. And then getting destroyed by Minnesota. Of course, Minnesota was a good team last year, but still, you can't. Losing by that much, 27, that's just really unacceptable. And then Indiana, Purdue, that stretch, just the stretch between Ohio State, really, and Wisconsin was crazy. That's absolutely, that's a stretch that nobody saw coming. I think most people would have them winning 3 or at least 3 of those games in that stretch, but that was not the case. And at the end of the season, even after all that disappointment, all they had to do was beat Iowa at home. All they had to do. And for a second, it actually looked like they might pull off the upset against ranked Iowa. But like their season went, they kind of choked it, and Iowa won on a game-winning field goal, and sent the Huskers home, not being bowl eligible. They finished 5-7. And with that great of a coach and all that talent, the way Adrian Martinez played in 2018, I was expecting big things from them in 2019. I thought he would improve, but that was not the case. The offense was non-existent. Luckily for the Huskers, Scott Frost is still there, and they still have a whole lot of talent. But man, they really disappointed last year. I was shocked. But anyway, guys, that's it for now. Thank you for joining in. Please do like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Leave your comments down below, opinions on who you think is the most disappointing teams. I definitely think there are some other options that could have been in here. Of course, being a big-name school definitely had an effect on it. 4 of the 5, schools that I had in the top 5 were big-name schools. Syracuse being the one that's not a big-name football school, but still, overall, I really think Nebraska was definitely the most disappointing team, and Texas, Michigan, Miami, Syracuse, very disappointing seasons as well. But anyway, guys, that's it for now. Thank you for joining in.